Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Hurdle the Line. I am back this week as your host for the week, just because our usual host, as you are aware, is currently a little bit busy with apparently more important things to do with his life. And our second standing quarterback was running a little bit late, so I thought best not throw him in at the last minute. I am Fletch. I am normally the host of College Football UK, and today I am joined by four absolutely wonderful human beings. I am joined by Ollie, Tom, Chapman and David. How are you, gentlemen?
Very good, very good.
Very good. Good to see you, Fletch.
And you, Chapman. It's really nice to have both you, Chapman and David, back, because it's been a few weeks. We've had a couple of weeks off. Well, we had 1 week off, and last time round it was just me, Ollie and Tom, so it's really nice to have you both back. And obviously it's good to have you both back as well, Ollie and Tom. Like, it is very nice indeed. Now, before we get properly rock and rolling with this, I'm going to throw over to you, David. Would you like to take care of our Break the Huddle this evening?
Yep, cheers, mate. So just a brief little update on the breaking news over the NFL week. We're going to start off by Josh Jacobs has called out claiming teams that can't wear the green in the Brazil game. That's happening across week one, where it's the Packers versus the Eagles. I think we'll dive into what happened in a bit. Moving on swiftly, so Justin Jefferson got paid. He was given a 4-year deal of $140 million with $110 million guaranteed. So yeah, dishing out the dollar. Linebacker Randley Gregory is suing the NFL for I think he's been he's used some kind of treatment or medication what was actually prescribed to him by the doctor. Obviously that was then taken the bad way by the NFL, so he's then actually now suing the Broncos on that part. Chiefs defensive end Thompson, he suffered a cardiac arrest in practice. As far as I'm aware, or as what I've read lately, he's actually okay. He's responding to medical treatment in the hospital, and he should be good to go very soon. Darren Waller, he's actually announced his retirement. He's released a particular heartbreaking, I think he was on a podcast, or it was some kind of announcement that he made live on a show, where the reasoning why he decided to step away. But we'll go into that in a bit more detail. The Lions, this is a bit of a pointless one, I think, in my opinion. The Lions had to forfeit a practice that I believe it was today's practice. Fletch, is it today's practice, the one that they've had to forfeit? Yeah. Regarding to that was that I think it was something to do with they were practicing too hard, or there was too much contact by themselves. So again, like I say, a bit of a pointless one. Moving on to a bit of Ollie's news. So the Browns have extended head coach Stefanski and GMs Andrew Berry. I'm sure we've got half an hour for you, Ollie, don't worry, in a bit. 6-time All-Pro guard, Hall of Fame legendary offensive line Larry Allen passed away at age 52. And the news that released a couple of hours ago was Tomlin for the head coach of the Steelers. He got a 3-year extension that takes it down to 2027 now. Other than that, I think that covers most of the news. We do have a helmet headline, like we always do try to bring to the show every week. Ohio State was voted for best helmet of college football. So there's your helmet headline for the week. And that kind of covers most of the NFL breaking news this week. Obviously, we'll probably touch in a bit too now.
Yeah. So, I think today's episode we're just going to kind of rattle through some of that news and some of the things that have been going on around the NFL the last few weeks. Now we'll start off with the most important headline of them all, and I think we can go into a real serious deep dive on this one. What's your favourite college helmet? Chapman, I'm going to go first because this is your forte.
Wow, you told me you're not going to throw me in the deep end, and then you just throw me right in. So obviously, as a Georgia fan, I have to say I love the Bulldogs helmet. But if we put them aside, and I could put the biases aside, I've always liked two. There's two helmets I think that are great, that are classic. I think you have to say Michigan, the Wolverines. I think that blue has always been nuts. And then, kind of in the same area, is the gold Notre Dame helmet. And the fact that Ohio State beat, I mean, even though Notre Dame hasn't won anything since 1988, and never probably will. That gold helmet is like, that's iconic, man. Like, they've got gold on their helmets. That's pretty cool. I would say, as a newcomer sorry, I'm naming three different things now. I do love the Oregon Ducks. I love that they embraced changing things up, and again, as they're not a legacy college football team in the long-term historic sense, but they brought a new, fresh sort of vibe to uniforms and stuff, which I appreciate. I love having the old and the new together, which I think that's the great thing about college ball.
It helps when you're obviously the owner of Nike is obviously went to Oregon, so it plays a big part in the uniforms that they get there. So they are very lucky in that sense.
Yeah, they get a few bucks from the old Phil Knight.
Well, at risk of this taking up 2 hours worth of conversation, we will have to move on from the actual helmet conversation, gentlemen. So, shall we start off properly? Let's go through in somewhat of a chronological. I'm sorry, I'll try that again in English. In a chronological order of how it was delivered, but there is one thing I'm going to leave to last because it will lead us nicely into the end segment of this episode. We'll start off with Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs and his comments about playing in Brazil. He was on a podcast this week where he made the claims that the two teams, the Green Bay Packers and the Eagles, cannot play in green, and they have been advised by the NFL not to do so because of gangs. And then has furthermore said that at this moment in time, the NFL were telling the players that they will have to travel around in armoured vehicles and all sorts of things like that. The NFL has come out and poo-pooed those statements. What do we think? Well, some of them. What do we think of those statements, Ollie?
Josh's statements or the NFL disproving it? You mean Josh's statements, I'm guessing?
I think we mean Josh's statements. We're not interested in what the NFL said.
I don't know where... I can only assume, so in case any of our listeners aren't aware, where they are playing is it Corinthians or Corinthians? I can't remember.
Corinthians.
It's their stadium, their football stadium, and their local rivals play in green. So they ban the colour green from their stadium on match days, basically, is the only thing that I can imagine anyone has used as a way to come up with what he's come up with. So yeah, I think he's just obviously he's seen that somewhere, he's been told that in a misconstrued way, and he's then run with it and just created this weird lie or kind of make-believe thing that he's said on a podcast or whatever it was for some reason, which has kind of got everyone going, and Twitter kind of had a lot of fun with it for a couple of evenings. But yeah, I'm glad the NFL quickly put a button in it and kind of shut him up basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think when it all broke out for me, I mean, I thought it was banter. Like, I did not believe it at the beginning. I thought this is just kind of, it can't be true. Like, you can't seriously. But once you kind of like look into the actual no's and whys, so like you just said there, Ollie, it's Corinthians stadium, and I think their rivals are called Palmeiras, which are green. I think Josh then obviously must have made a joke about it all, and then it all suddenly kicked off, and then but it's legit, it's true.
Yeah, there is some truth to it. Like I said, when this all kicked off, I do remember somewhat, because I used to have my dad used to get given lots of football shirts from around the world when I was a kid, and my dad used to just hand them to me. So I had a Corinthians one. So I used to I had a little bit of knowledge on on the subject. Like, not very much, but I did know that green was just a no-go for Corinthians. It really wasn't, especially on match days. And I was looking into it a little bit more recently and found out that a Corinthians player did once recently get fined for wearing green boots during a game by the club because of the incitement, and that is a fact. He got fined simply for wearing green boots. But the whole thing around armoured vehicles is absolute nonsense. But I've got to ask you, Tom, like, what do you... I kind of want to see. I kind of want to see armoured vehicles now.
I think it was probably a thing that was taken, like, out of context maybe slightly, because from what I understand, I think it was on the Greenlight podcast with Chris Long, and they're probably chatting like conversationally or whatever, and then he comes out with this thing, and you know, much as it is nowadays as well, as soon as you say something like a high profile person, and you know, the media runs with it and what have you. So he might not have meant it in that, so maybe it was meant in a joking way or whatever, but at the same time it's good that the NFL kind of scuppered any sort of thing that in relation to it, because it's obviously a bunch of bogus. So yeah.
And swiftly moving on, because there's only so much that can be said on this topic, really, that without beating a dead horse. I do think it's funny, and like I said, I don't know about you guys, but there is something quite fun about players turning up in armoured vehicles just for one game, just for a bit of fun. I think it'd be quite interesting.
Who was was it Jalen Ramsey? I think who was it? Who the very first day of like he wanted a new deal, and it was the guy who showed up in an armored truck, like the bank truck, and popped out of it. Oh, who was that? I need to Google it.
I think it was Ramsey. I think it was Ramsey.
It might have been Ramsey.
Is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Was it? I want to say it was in LA, but
back up the
that was a fun use of armored trucks,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, that was good.
That's good. It's a flex move.
The thing is, I'm kind of
That's
surprised that he
Yes.
actually thought the NFL would pay for armoured vehicles for its players. So I don't know. It's a funny situation.
yeah, it's a funny one.
NFL were like, you can get the bus.
Yeah.
Right.
It was Jalen Ramsey. I was correct.
Yeah. If you type in Jalen Ramsey A, Google automatically says armoured truck.
There you go.
Next up in the list of news, we did have Justin Jefferson getting absolutely paid. And I think this is a little bit more something we can beef out a little bit. Fully deserved, am I right?
100%. 100%.
100%.
Crazy money, but 100% deserved.
Best,
Yeah, I mean,
best receiver in
110
the league.
guaranteed is mega, isn't
It's
it?
quarterback money. I mean, 5-6 years ago, that was a big deal for a quarterback. So it's crazy money, and you know, a lot of money to kind of allocate to one position player. But it's Jefferson. He is arguably, you know, one of the best receivers in terms of at this point into their career of all time. Not many wide receivers have had a better statistical output in the first, 4 seasons of his career. So yeah, well deserved. Happy for him. You know, happy for his family. You know, his grandkids are going to be sorted for generations. So it's you know, it's good for him. It's good for his family. It's good for Vikings. I'm sure all their fans are really relieved to see him locked up long term, and you know, hopefully can support McCarthy and have a good season this year.
Yeah. So
The
what?
guy's on a crazy trajectory in terms of, you know, from year 2, he had the most receiving yards, year 3, now year 4, like he could just go on and on and on, and he's so pivotal to that offense, especially with them rebuilding and everything. You could argue that he's more important than most teams' big name wide receivers, just because he is the focal point completely, like of the Vikings. So they needed to pay him, and he needed to keep him around. So
I think, like you said,
yeah.
the fact that they are rebuilding as well has allowed them to pay him this money. Obviously, that if they signed Kurt to the deal that Kurt got in Atlanta, you probably aren't able to give this deal to. Well, you could, but you know, a lot of teams wouldn't.
Miami.
So obviously, the fact that they do now obviously have a rookie contract, going into his first year of his rookie contract. It's a 4-year deal. It aligns with his contract, the money that they're saving, hopefully, on the quarterback. So they are, you know, it's a lot of money, but they were in a position to pay him that money.
Well, let's talk about it. Let's put the money aside for a second. Justin Jefferson he's averaging 98 yards a game the last 4 years. Is that right, Tom? I think you were the one putting that in our chat group.
Yeah, 98.3 yards per game, which is the most all time.
Yeah, Julio had that record at one point before he joined 3 other teams and didn't do anything.
He's still up there. He's still top 5, top 6.
He's top 5, top 6. Anyway, but what I was going to say, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to always relate everything back to the Falcons because I don't want to be the other person that does that with their team all the time. But I would say, when we made Julio the highest paid wide receiver, I believe twice in his tenure with us. Or at least once, and then he was like top 2, 3 towards the end of his career. But I would say, and I would think Jefferson as Hill can, and I would say Jamar Chase when he's got Burrow, they can take over games. They can win you games, and you're paying for that. Now, will the wide receiver market at some point exceed where the money is? I think we are going to get there to some point, even with the cap getting higher. But I just think it's so funny. You listen to all these national media shows talking about the NFL, first of all, they all go, yes, that Justin Jefferson deserves this money. But then it's like, but why are we paying these guys so much? But then it's like, it's like this, and I'm like, it's not your money. And you got to pay somebody. That's the weird thing about it. It's like some point, but I know it's not great team build. I think for years it wasn't great team building for the wide receiver to be, the second highest paid player next to your quarterback, or sometimes the highest paid player. And I think that's really hard for old school GMs too, who I listen to a lot, think about. But this is a new NFL, and now you might even have to start paying 2 wide receivers. So it's just interesting. I'm not sure what my point was there, but it's just interesting because I think you can only give that kind of money to the elite 3 or 4. However many we have, you can give it to a guy who can win you games. Stephon Diggs ain't winning you games no more. So I think what the Bills did was smart. You know what I mean? He's not winning you games. Amon St. Brown, I saw that dude win games. And they got a deal too. Let's talk about the Lions. Ollie, it's your thing. Pay them quick, pay them as fast as you can, because that deal looks so much better 2 years later. I'll shut up now.
And there was a lot of stuff retrospectively now that, those deals have taken place. Even I think Devontae Smith, obviously he signed his contract or whatever. Then there's people coming out saying, he could have asked for more money and all this kind of stuff. Obviously,
Nico Collins has just come up.
Yeah,
he's probably watching this going, I should have waited another week. I could have got an extra 3 or 4 million.
It's all about the timing as well, isn't it? It is for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a win-win for both.
Yeah.
So I was
just going to say, kind of as Chapman was saying, it is a lot of money to put into one wide receiver, and not to, I know he wasn't alluding to as me being the person that always throws it back to their team, but to throw it back to my team, the Browns, obviously our 3 top wide receivers, we're paying them 39 million I think this year, which is going to end up being 4 million more than he's getting paid as one player. But I would make the argument you'd probably rather Jefferson over those 3. So certain players do command that kind of that privilege of they have to be paid as the highest at their position or whatever.
So I find it interesting that you said I'm going to speak about my team and then didn't speak about the Colts. That was quite fun. So I was going to ask 2 questions, but Ollie, you actually answered my first question with one of the first things you said. I was going to say question number 1 was, are the Vikings given the luxury of paying Jefferson this much because they've got JJ McCarthy on a rookie deal? Which you've already said, yes, you've got part that. That's one of the big advantages of having a rookie quarterback. You also said, and bear in mind I'm a Michigan fan, you also said, he's going to be the focal point. It was said it was going to be the focal point of that offense. No, it's not. JJ McCarthy's going to be handing the ball off a load of times this season. That's fine. Justin Jefferson's barely going to be seeing it until the end of the game. Justin Jefferson's yards are fantastic. No, I
don't know what world you're living in, Fletch.
I didn't want to be the person who brought up the Lions first, but now you brought him up. It's going to be fun. I have a dog in this fight somewhat to some extent. He's in my division. I see him twice a year. I want to see what yards he puts up now he's not throwing against Vildor twice. Kirby Joseph twice. So good luck on that one. Terry and Arnold's going to eat him up. End of story. Finally, what I was going to ask you all, gentlemen, I'm sorry, I needed to get that out. What I wanted to ask you was, what does this mean for CD Lamb and Jamar Chase?
Next up,
Steve,
What it means for CD Lamb is that he's the next guy up, and he's going to ask for more money, if not more money from, and he's got more leverage in I mean, he can just hold out, and who's that going to throw the ball to if CD doesn't get paid? Like, what are the Cowboys going to do without CD? Like, they're not going to be able to do a whole lot, you wouldn't imagine. So, and as Ollie said multiple times before, this paid them early. Like, the fact that they haven't paid them early and they've waited this long,
they always do.
Drag on and on. They do.
They seem to always wait until they let the market decide what the value for the position of the player that they have, going into free agency is. Then they go, right, can we afford that? Yes, we sign him. No, right, we let him leave.
And then they overpay for free agents. Like, they overpaid for Michael Gallup. Like
after letting.
They overpaid Zeke.
I think it's a new. Oh, sorry, David, you go.
No, I was just going to say, I think the Jefferson deal really does set the bar now to what the other wide receivers are going to ask for in the market. So you've got Lamb, you've got Chase coming up for a deal as well. Those guys are going to be looking, or might be looking for the similar deal, rough and give and take. But I think with Lamb, you've got to view the other needs of the Cowboys as well. They've got Dak, that we don't know what's going to happen with Dak Prescott. We've got, I think, Micah Parsons. He's going to need a deal soon as well. Massive player for the defensive side of the ball. So I think it's the Cowboys, like you say, Ollie. I think they're just waiting it out and see how far they can go without kind of like paying the lad. So I don't know. That's how I see it.
It looks like the reality of it though with the Cowboys is that they're probably not going to be able to keep all three of those players. Like, I mean, they're all just ridiculously good players. Like, the likelihood is that one of them is going to leave. And at the moment, it looks more and more likely it's going to be Dak Prescott because, you would have thought that they would sign him to a long-term extension, but they haven't, and they're going to eat a big dead cap for it, or just a big cap number, and he'll be a free agent because they've already franchise tagged him twice. So, be really interested to see what they do.
Thing is, if I'm CD as well, I have no reason to take any less money than what Jefferson does. I'm not. The situation Dallas is in, you're not selling me on this kind of, it's not the Chiefs, it's not it's not a straight pathway to a thing, it's not you can say what you want about the Cowboys, but no one probably thinks they're going to win the Super Bowl next year, so it's not. So why would you not ask for less money? He's got similar statistical output. I think we all agree that Jefferson is better, but if you're CD's agent, I'm walking. Every kind of negotiation I have, I'm putting the numbers on the table and saying, look, it's comparable, if not better than Jefferson in certain stats, like you said, the touchdown. So if I'm him, I'm not taking anything less than what Jefferson got. So we'll kind of have to see how that goes. I know he hasn't attended any of the voluntary stuff so far. So we might get a holdout in this kind of training camp. So we'll have to wait and see.
If that does happen and the holdout happens, does that mean that the Cowboys could start slapping the franchise tag on him and for a year?
No, you don't do that till next year. But they probably. I mean, look. I think the first person you pay in that group is. I think they've made their decision on Dak. I think Dak's walking because I think you would have gotten that deal. Jerry would have gotten that deal done, and maybe it still gets done. It's in the next couple months, but it feels like they may feel like they've hit a ceiling with Dak at this point, and maybe it's best for both parties if Dak goes somewhere else and they start over at that position. Don't forget they do have Trey Lance there. Trey Lance still has a lot of talent, but he needed a lot of time to grow, and maybe it'll have been 3 years, maybe, and also they're not necessarily they're a snake bit for a little bit at quarterback, but yeah, they do. No, I don't think they drafted one, but they've been charmed with quarterbacks over the last few years, so maybe they have confidence in that. But I think we're also just talking about team building here. So, are you good enough to pay CeeDee Lamb? I think so. I think they should pay CeeDee Lamb because I think he's an asset I don't know if I'm giving him the Justin Jefferson deal though, just because I'm not sure I've seen enough out of CeeDee Lamb in big games to be like, oh, that's it. And again, to be fair to Justin, we haven't seen Justin in that many like playoff games and big games, but there is just something watching Justin Jefferson where you're like, oh, that's a dude. You know what I mean? And not that CeeDee Lamb hasn't had that. And again, I'm just talking about the eyeball test here. But yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I think David, to your point, I have no idea what the Cowboys are doing. It's very bizarre. I don't think anybody really does. They beat to their own drum.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry Jones and his son always have. They draft really well. I mean, I so wish we would have drafted Michael Parsons over Kyle Pitts. And there's not that I don't love Kyle, but that dude, we needed that guy on our defense, man. Anyway, yeah. I mean, do you? So, can I just ask a quick question, Flesh, if we move on? But what's the cutoff line where, okay, we all agree Justin Jefferson deserves top money. We all agree Tyreek Hill for sure. I mean, that's like 1A, 1B to me. Chase, I think, is on that list. I think, who am I missing? CeeDee Lamb is probably there too, just statistically. Where's the cutoff? Where's the cutoff of the $30 million receiver? Devontae Adams was there at one point, but he seems sort of like, I don't know if I guess I'm trying to find what the line is. What's the line where you're like,
Cooper Kupp?
Yeah, how much is AJ Brown on?
Cooper Kupp hasn't. I mean,
Cup hasn't
been
been
that guy
my
2
first
years.
thought.
So
There's a cutoff for us, but I don't think there is a cutoff in terms of for the market. Whether they deserve. So kind of going back to my point, I don't think CD deserves the same money that Jefferson got, but I think just the market and his statistical output dictates it. So
possibly,
so I think it's going to become the new norm, maybe that if you have a upper echelon wide receiver coming up on his first deal, he's going to get that 30 mark.
But not everybody's going to. But I do think there's depending, because they don't all statistics are created equal, and you can see there's like, I mean, to me, okay. Jesse Bates is a great example. Jesse Bates is like the 5th highest paid safety in the league, but he played like the 1st or 2nd in that deal that you got. I mean, it's like you don't always get everything, and I know like what you're saying. I don't know. I guess my premise is I don't think the wide receiver market's going to continue on like the QB market because it can't. That makes any sense?
Yeah, I know.
Because it won't, because there'll just be, there has to be tiers, just like there are quarterbacks.
Well, it won't be sustainable if it does.
But I think it's more to the influx of the wide receiver talent that's come into the league. If you look at the wide receiver versus quarterback talent that's come into the league the last 5 years, there's been a lot more hits with the wide receiver position. The talent that's coming into the league every year almost now seems to just be so high at that wide receiver position. So I suppose, like you said, you wouldn't. I think we all think it wouldn't. There's got to be a limit. I don't think. If we're getting to a point where wide receivers are getting 40 million, we might have to pause and look around and go, look, this is getting a bit silly now. But like I kind of just alluded to, I don't know, because like I said, the wide receiver talent is so high at the minute. There's always going to be that next one up. So I guess it's just like you said, we'll have to wait and see.
But I guess my point is, not every next one is going to be Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb. I guess my point. That's my, because like. I'm trying to think of who some exciting guys are. I don't know, like the Lions. Yeah,
people like that.
Yeah.
I think like people like the Nets, kind of, in the next 2 or 3 years that are going to get their deals. Derek Wilson's like this. I kind of think of those players and how good they.
Olave.
Yeah, these
London's all in those classes.
They just. I think this just alludes to how good wide receivers have been in the last few years. Yeah. I think the talent's just been so high.
I want to throw this out there though, that this is a cyclical league. We will go through periods where positions get, like, certain positions seem to grow faster than others. This is, we'll go through a period where a ton of great quarterbacks turn up in the league. You'll go through a draft where it seems like every quarterback's a hit, especially from the first couple of rounds. And then we look at 21 and 22 when we go, where the hell are the quarterbacks out of them drafts? Where are they now? None of them are anywhere. So this is a cyclical league, and when you have, particularly again coming out of college, if you have a particularly great wide receiver class. And I find that a couple of years later, when that wide receiver class starts to go, you'll start to look at some great DBs coming through, because over the period of the great wide receivers, colleges are now focusing on DBs to try and combat the great wide receivers coming through. So a couple of years later, you end up having great defensive ends. You get some great.
Can I just say that alludes to kind of the hype of drafting an SEC corner at the minute? Is you look at all of these wide receivers that are coming out of the SEC.
Exactly.
If you get a corner that's playing well in the SEC, you draft them because they're good.
Exactly. So this is it's cyclical. So when you get prominent positions, the position they tend to go up against the most on the opposite side of the ball improves because of the people that they're going up against. It just tends to happen, and you see it also in, throughout, not just that, but throughout the league as well. What's it, Chapman?
Well, I was just going to say, I actually slightly disagree with that about why we're seeing this in the wide receiver, because I think this more has to do with two factors. A, the change in rules over the last 20 years that have systematically favored the offense, more scoring. We've also had an influx of talent where there's a whole generation of quarterbacks and wide receivers who have been trained since they were younger to be these positions. You have polished, ready quarterbacks. You have the influence of the college game into the NFL, which never happened about 20 years ago. And I think a lot of that, I don't, because there's never been a time in the league where wide receivers were as important as this. So I know what you mean about trends. And I think what you're saying about trends in the NFL being cyclical, in that a defense comes up and it stops Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes has to change. He does something different. Oh, the Chiefs win by defense, and then Patrick making enough plays. Then that changes. Tom Brady. I mean, look at the evolution of the Pats over 20 years. Like, it was defense, defense. Then it became, we're an offensive team. We're two tight ends. Blah blah blah. Like, so I think it's more of all these factors. But I think it behooves a lot of people, especially old school guys who've been in the NFL for a long time, seeing because the wide receiver was always the diva position, right? It was always the last thing. Bill Walsh famously said, it's the last thing you get on a team building. It's you build your line, you get your quarterback, the wide receiver is the last thing. So I just think it's just really, really interesting. And I do think Miami having two basically wide receiver ones is going to be, an interesting trend possibly too. Because I remember when two running backs became a big thing, 20 odd years ago, and that was like, oh, you've got two, So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off much, but I just thought that that's one of the interesting things.
You're absolutely right. There's a lot more nuance over what I was saying, and you're absolutely right there. I would also like to add two things again. So I'm very sorry, and then we'll start to move on. So when we're talking about Justin Jefferson and CD Lamb and the yardage and all that sort of stuff, one of them had Nick Mullins throwing to them this season. One of them had Dak Prescott. Big difference. The other
one of them missed 7 games due to injury as well, and still managed to have a 1,000-yard season.
And then you've also got CD Lamb, and I going back to that game. We're not going to talk about anything else that happened in that game, but we'll go back to that Lions-Cowboys game this year. The moment that won moment of the year. Watch that play. Watch CD Lamb. That is pure, unadulterated luck. Derek Barnes, that was a safety, and Derek Barnes had two hands on Dak Prescott in the end zone, completely blew it. Dak Prescott ran away, and look, Vildor's on the floor. Kindle Vildor's he's gone for a nap. He's gone camping. He's doing whatever. He's on the floor. You can't. That's pure luck. 92-yard touchdown. He wins Play of the Year. That goes into it, but pure luck. He's not him. Not compared to Justin Jefferson. That's all of the things I've seen from Justin Jefferson and Justin Jefferson. That was pure luck. Anyway, moving on.
I think Chase is better than CD. Just to a last point to put in there. In case people thought I was a massive CD fan.
So we're going on to the whole. I think there's not too much to say about this, but with the whole Randy Gregory suing the NFL. What? Shall we speak to our local THC expert?
I saw that coming from a mile away. David, take it away. So it was obviously when I first saw the headline, I just assumed he was, like most of these things, someone was smoking weed, whatever. That's an odd thing to sue the NFL for. Maybe it's just the change of laws, in society now, whatever. And then obviously when I read into it and found it was actually medicine that he was prescribed by his doctor, that was what he was being fined for. Kind of obviously, actually made me read into it and be a bit more intrigued into it. So yeah, I mean, there's not really much to go into on it. I just think it's a bit of obviously an unfair situation for Gregory, taking a substance that he believed, he was medically cleared, well, not medically cleared, but cleared by the NFL to take. Which obviously there was a miscommunication, whether it was from the team doctors, whether it was from his doctors or whatever. So is he suing the NFL as a whole or the Broncos?
Yeah.
So he's suing the NFL as a whole,
Broncos,
right?
I don't know if he's suing the Broncos included within that.
I was going to say, he's obviously suing the
NFL.
Broncos for obviously the misinformation of giving him the drug in the first place, I'm assuming, and then suing the NFL for obviously the loss of the finances that he's lost because of it, which I think was what, 500,000 he ended up paying in fines, purely to take a medicine that he was prescribed by a doctor to take. So unfair situation.
The NFL have come out now saying that they no longer suspend players who test positive for THC. So
I was going to say, players can smoke it now, I'm pretty sure. So
that's it. But also, don't forget, this off-season, a couple of players from a franchise that just can't seem to get it together this year, backstage, have also been done for holding marijuana.
That's different, though. That's completely different.
No, but this is the thing. This is the whole kind of like they've said no, don't suspend
my Chiefs.
Took you a minute, didn't it? Took you a minute.
Well, they're like the weed's legal over there in Missouri.
Back-to-back Super Bowl winners don't get to complain about anything. Stop.
Exactly.
Please. Yeah, Tom, you just take it.
But this is the thing. They might not suspend, but they still have issued fines. And the fact is that he isn't suing it because the rules on. Well, he is kind of, but this is a discrimination suit. He's claiming discrimination.
It's because of the Colorado law as well. I think he can be prescribed under the Colorado all my days. Colorado law.
But I think a lot of it also has to do with kind of the issues that he was having. A lot of them were mental health issues, and a lot of them were in relation to mental health. And if he got all the appropriate medical diagnoses, and if anyone knows me, I'm not going to disagree with medicine and science and all that sort of stuff. He got all the appropriate diagnoses, and if, as far as he cares, he has a specific disability, and he was being fined for taking the appropriate medication to deal with that disability, then he has every right to feel like he's being discriminated against. That's my personal view on it. I'm not going to get much further into that because I know it can get it can get a bit silly, these conversations, but that's the gist of it. He's been prescribed medication for an illness he has, and he's been fined for using that medication, and he's claiming discrimination.
I mean, all to say about it is just hopefully he wins the suit and gets his money back.
We won't rag on your Chiefs now. Tom, we need to ask you, there's been obviously a very unfortunate incident this week. Not much needs to be said on this matter. We're not going to drag this one out, because there's only one thing that actually matters when it comes down to things like this. Is BJ Thompson okay?
Yes, obviously, I've been following all, Chiefs news recently, and when it came out, everyone was shocked and all that. He initially was having a seizure, and then he went into cardiac arrest for a minute or so before he was resuscitated, which is obviously great. He was in hospital recovering. As far as I know, he either got released today or is getting released tomorrow. He's all good. He's gonna begin off-field recovery and all that kind of stuff. I don't imagine that he'll be playing this year like now. I mean, he was a backup, so he would have had a limited role anyway, but obviously err on the side of caution, I imagine. But I guess one thing I wanted to say about it is that one of the players who was the first to go into the medical staff and call them out and everything was actually, the much maligned Harrison Butker. So the fact he's still looking out for his team and all that kind of stuff is always a good thing. But yeah, just praying for his speedy recovery, and just glad to hear that he's coming out of hospital.
Absolutely. That's like I say. That's all that matters is that young man. As horrible as what's happened has happened, all that matters is that he's on the mend and on the way to hopefully a full bill of health. So, unfortunately, we've also had other news of ill health in the league this week. Now, Darren Waller announced his retirement, but also, as David mentioned earlier, he mentioned in an interview recently about a quite serious medical incident that happened to him in November, and that has caused him to rethink his position in football, in life. A lot of us will remember sadly remember, we want to get it out of our brains, the music video that he recorded. That was terrible. But what else needs to be said about Darren Waller? First of all, did this retirement come as a shock to you guys? Because I was thinking he was going to be coming back this year. I had no...
I don't know. It didn't shock me massively in the fact that he's had quite a lot of nagging injuries, especially over the last few years. Because he was a really productive. He's like one of the most productive tight ends in the league for a good 3-4 year span. When he was especially with the Raiders and stuff. So yeah, sad to see that he's retiring at just the age of 31. But obviously he's putting his health first, so can prod him for that.
So is the medical condition alluding to the comments he made on the podcast recently about he had breathing difficulties? I don't know. I wasn't sure if it was that he woke up. He was
in hospital for a couple of days.
Yeah, he either woke up with breathing difficulties or just suddenly started having breathing difficulties. Contacted the emergency service and spent some time in hospital. Which he obviously didn't make public at the time. So I think to answer your question, I suppose it'd be a shock if you asked me, like a few months ago. But I think everything that's kind of been pointing towards this happening the last kind of month or so. I mean, it was pretty much reported that he was considering and leaning towards retiring a couple of weeks ago. So I'm not surprised in the moment today when I saw the news. No, but I would have been surprised if you had told me a few months ago that he would have retired.
Yeah, I think the Giants they were made aware that he could be on the path of retirement due to obviously what he stated on the interview about him not being able to breathe one morning. I think he really did put his heart and soul into that announcement. I think you really did feel that he's put his life first now, and obviously the passion and what he loves for the NFL secondly. And then obviously they drafted the tight end Theo Johnson in the 4th round as well. So I think they had it in the back of their minds that it could be coming, and obviously that was the choice at the end of the day.
And allude to the music video that Fletch mentioned. Obviously, as much as I despise him for making me have to endure that experience, I'm sure you can all agree with me that we all hope that he can move forward with his life. Hopefully he can figure out what he wants to do in his life moving forward, can have a good bit of health and be successful in whatever he does outside of the NFL.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that was going to be my next thing, was I can make a joke about the music video because it was terrible.
It was bad.
But also the reasons behind it and what he's going through, it'd wipe out the best of us. So, here's to another person who's going to hopefully go ahead and make the most out of the rest of their life. Really quick, I'll literally just fly past this because, as David said, it's pointless and it's stupid. The Lions on the 27th, the week commencing the 27th of May, held organised team activities. There was too much contact in those practices, and the NFLPA were warned. The Lions were told on Friday, which was the 7th of June. 7th? I'm trying to count back. Yeah, 7th of June, Friday, they were being punished, and they had to forfeit 2 days, which as of recording, it is today, the 10th of June. OTAs. Just one day cancelled for too much contact in May. So, yeah, end of story, moving on.
Such a Dan Campbell, only to Dan Campbell that would happen to.
And speaking,
that's a very early June like headline. That is just...
yeah, it feels a bit to me like, you know, when we were about to say, was it Zach Wilson hasn't turned up to voluntary team activities? Like, who cares? Like, oh no, oh well. Anyway, also just in some of in the saddest news that came out, Chapman, I'm going to throw this one to you first because you will have experience of this man more than any of us will do. Larry Allen passed away, a absolute legend of the game, and it's beautiful because I was never lucky enough to watch him growing up. I know that he was a teammate of Dan Campbell's, but to listen to all the outpouring of messages and just the tributes that have come out have been immense. And we all know who Larry Allen is because of the legacy left on the game. But you watched him as he was playing throughout his career. How good was it?
Well, Fletch, I mean, I'm not that old, so I was not doing a lot of line study back in the when I was 10, 12, 13, but I will just say those Cowboys teams were phenomenal, and as I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard, you know, like, people talk about the 90s, it was either the Cowboys or 49ers every other year. That NFC Championship game was like, that was the Super Bowl back then, but those teams were amazing. If you remember, Emmitt Smith probably owes Larry and a bunch of and Moose and a bunch of those guys a lot of thanks for breaking Walter Payton's record eventually as a Cardinal. Weirdly, I gotta say, Fletch, to be honest with you, I read a lot about Larry Allen and just like in that stuff. I mean, those teams all had like a bajillion like Hall of Famers on it. Like those especially the 91, 92 teams. Like those two teams were awesome. But yeah, I mean, all I can say, Fletch, is I mean, I was too young to think about. You didn't think about offensive linemen back then. You thought about who was the biggest, baddest dude on defense, who was your running back, and then like quarterback. Weirdly, quarterback, wide receiver. I mean, I loved running backs back then. So funny enough, but Larry Allen was a big.
Well, yeah.
So, but what I was going to say is, in those 90s, watching the NFC on Fox, man, that's when I fell in love with football. Like that's so they were that Dallas team was a big part of like really falling in love with the game, like more so as like as a teenager and stuff. Even though I hated when they won all the time, but you can deny how awesome they were.
I was going to say with Larry Allen as well. He's responsible for one of the greatest athletic feats like in NFL history. Running down Darrell Green, who was like I think he was a hurdler or a sprinter. Like he was top level speed, like 4.3, 4.4 speed, and this 350-pound man running him down on the sideline to basically stop a touchdown was just insane at the size that he was. So that just exemplified how great he was and what kind of physically imposing stature that he had as well. But I heard that I've read a lot about him, since his passing and stuff, and it sounds like he had an even bigger heart off the field as well. As shown by, as Fletch alluded to, Dan Campbell, talking very emotionally about him and just saying how just what a kind person he was, always looking out for others and stuff. So, it's a sad loss for the NFL community.
Tom, I think that's a great thing to say. And despite, all the All-Pros, Hall of Fame, the Super Bowls and everything, but people kept going back to his character. And with all the talk about different athletes and some of the character issues we have today, I think it's great to know that Larry's legacy, while he was a phenomenal player, one of the best ever to play his position, that's what I also took away, was like that he left a legacy of being a good man, a good person, somebody who was a great teammate, a good friend, and in my view, I think that just speaks loads. So
yeah.
That's what a great way to be remembered. And I feel bad for all his family, obviously, and his 52 is very young. So we wish his family the best, and not the best, but we hope give them our thoughts and prayers, obviously, as his ex-teammates and his coaches and all the people that know and care about him.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And that's something that can never be understated. It is just what a person people like that are. And there are a few of them from around that time as well. Again, it seems to be from around that time just a lot of just genuinely great human beings in football. Moving on to, because we're gonna get into the point now where we're segueing into the last bit. So we'll start off with the Browns have extended head coach Kevin Stefanski and GM Andrew Berry. Now, Ollie, we're going to throw this to you. You've got 20 minutes, so we just want your short version. How are you feeling?
No, I will. I'll try not to, go too much on about it. I can do that on my own personal Twitter, but as I'm sure you all saw on my personal Twitter, I was very, very ecstatic with the news. Very happy to see that both, obviously, Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry have been extended. And I know a lot of fans of most teams probably would think, why are you getting so kind of, it's just an extension for a head coach or a GM. But in Cleveland, this is not something that usually happens. The last head coach to be extended was Romeo Crennel in 2008, and coincidentally, the same year was the last GM that we ever extended, which was Phil Savage in the same year, 2008. They were both fired the same year, so it's kind of a big thing for the Browns. Why he's been extended? I mean, he's led. He's come into an organisation that was the least successful organisation in the previous 20 years in terms of winning percentage, viewed as almost, a garbage kind of dump as an organisation by the league as a whole. He led them to 2 playoff appearances in 4 years, 2 11-win seasons in 4 years. Something that I don't think the Browns have done. I think they had 2 11-win seasons in the previous 31 years before Stefanski got here, and to obviously have 2 of those in 4 years is a big improvement of what came before him. So it's a massive deal, like I said, because it's not something that we're used to as Browns fans. It's the first time in my fanhood that a head coach has been, extended that I know of. You know what I mean? I wasn't really following the Browns in 2008, so it's massive. It's great. I'm really happy. I won't try and go too much onto it. I could rattle all day about all the. It's the first coach since this, or the first GM since this, and all this kind of stuff. I won't go into all of that, but yeah, it's a great day for Browns fans. That was,
and also for the for the mastery that he exacted like last year. 4 different starting quarterbacks to make the playoffs, 5 even.
Technically 5, but we don't count that Jeff Driscoll game at the last game.
Yeah.
What percentage of the cap
26% of the salary cap was on IR. But obviously, again, 2 coach of the years in 4 seasons. I think he's the only active NFL coach to have 2 coach of the year awards. One of only 4 or 5 to ever win 2. He's got the team into a really good place. Something we're not, like he said in his the first time he spoke after the extension. The work's not done. It's only just started. It's he's not gonna. It's not like he's won anything yet. The coaching awards are great, but he'll tell you more than anyone that's not what his goal is. Obviously, the goal is Super Bowl. So yes, we're all really happy about it, but now it's kind of it's done, and we move forward, and the work starts now, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think from the Browns
anyone else got any thoughts
fan base, yeah, just from myself, like from the fans base perspective, I mean, I think we get to a point where you need stability, you need to have consistency, and to build from what they did last season. I think it's the best thing to do is to try and continue with that same coaching stuff. You don't want to keep seeing what we've been seeing for the last few years, where it's just been turnover of head coaches, of quarterbacks, etc. I think it's time to to kind of stick with your personnel and obviously then build up from there. That's
like you say,
the Patriots are kind of going for now. But
yeah, and I mean, well, the Patriots, and again, kind of two things to like. I mean, like it's the longest tenured coach we've had since Bill Belichick in the '90s. Obviously, before before deactivation. So stability is so important in the NFL. We alluded to it last week, Fletch and Tom, when we spoke about the toughest divisions and the AFC North. The reason why the AFC North is regarded as the toughest division, and the reason I think it is in the position it is now, is because you look at the stability within the division. Kevin Stefanski is the most recent head coach to be hired in that division, and he's now just received his extension. So you look at every team in that division; they all have a stable organisation, and I think that's so. Like you said, David, it's so important, and something that us Browns fans have not been used to in the last however long, since reactivation at least.
There's more the teams that need to be learning from this. There's not just the Browns. You've got Dan Campbell as well. Look what he's done with the Lions as well, when he started from bottom to have nothing, and look where he's managed to get them now. So I think it's more teams need to learn from this. I think it's you can't keep just getting a coach and then sacking them every 2 years and that's it.
That's what some Browns fans wanted.
Cornerstone.
I was going to say, I mean, there's been a lot of people crawling through his head the last couple of years. Obviously, he had the playoff appearance in 2020, but the last two seasons, the beta year wasn't great. Then we traded for Deshaun Watson. He was suspended for most of the season. That season wasn't great. We had a lot of fans in our own fan base calling for him to be fired, and it alludes to what you said, David. I was one of the people that was sat there saying, well, and do what? We're just going to be back in the square one. We keep churning through coaches, keep churning through GMs. Look at the good teams in the NFL. They don't do that. So I'm just happy to be in this position.
Exactly, Ellie. Like, continuity is the cornerstone of success. Like you see the successful teams throughout the league. Like especially when I talk about Chiefs, obviously they haven't had a lot of turnover in terms of the staff and stuff. And you see how successful they've been. So if you can build something like that, which you're well on your way to doing, you've got such a good roster already to achieve great things. So yeah. Well,
it's not enough to just simply have a team with people there all the time. If they're not good enough, they're not good enough. And I think one thing that actually needs to be spoke about here, again, the Lions have brought up, what the Lions have got isn't just simply down to Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell and the continuity. It's down to the culture and the holistic approach to culture that has been implemented from the very top of the organisation in Sheila Fordham. And that's what's important as well. And one thing the Browns have finally got right, the Lions have finally got right, the Bengals have finally got right, and it is the implementation of culture. They're getting there. They're a lot better than they used to be. What was the joke?
I'm just bitter, man. I'm just bitter. I just hate the Bengals. It's like.
But what was the joke?
Bengals.
The joke was Detroit. Detroit, Cincinnati, and Cleveland was the Bermuda Triangle of the NFL, where draft picks went to die.
Yeah.
These are organisations that are getting it back, because the organisations that are the best are the ones that have a holistic approach and treat the whole organisation as a whole culture, and they all buy in and get it right. But talking about consistency in the AFC North, at the head coaching position, Mike Tomlin, the man who still has never had a losing season, has signed a 3-year extension. Chapman, talking about consistency, how important is it for the Steelers to continue on with the consistency they've got? And is it the right move to continue with Mike Tomlin?
Mike Tomlin, in my opinion, he's my favorite head coach in the NFL, just from a fan perspective. But he is consistent, and I think they tried to rebuild on the fly without Ben Roethlisberger, and I don't think that has been successful. So what they're doing now is a smart rebuild, and I think they went really cheap at quarterback. And if Russell Wilson has any life left in him, or if they can revitalize Justin Fields, you'll probably have them for decently cheap for the time going. You could still build a team and put it around. There's very few coaches in the NFL who I would trust a team in long term. So yes, I think it is the right move. Now, if you get to end of 2027 and you're winning, you're winning 9, 10 games, but you're not progressing in the playoffs, or you're not, going in, then maybe, things end, right? David's team, I don't think any of us would question the fact that Bill Belichick is probably the greatest NFL coach of all time, but it was just time for that to end, and age plays a part. Mike Tomlin's still very young too, relatively so. So to answer your question, Flash, yeah, you're not getting if you fire Mike. I mean, this is what the Titans did. You fire Mike Tomlin, or you let Mike Tomlin walk or whatever. Who you get in there that's better than him? I don't know the list. Maybe you get Bill Belichick. That's probably the list. Mike Vrabel, I don't think he's better than Mike Tomlin. Sorry, he's not. But he's still a very great coach. So, and that's what the Titans did. They decided to move on from somebody who had built a culture, who had done a good job, who had a couple bad years, but there was a power struggle there. The other thing is, Fletch, too, is that Mike Tomlin runs that show. So
yeah,
there's the way it all works, right? And I think that's important. And it's hard, man. So I somebody who's been through, is on their third head coach in 6 years now,
yeah.
And I liked all the coaches coming in. I like Dan Campbell. Dan Quinn.
I like him too.
I was really sad when I was really upset. I mean, Dan Quinn not working out, and we'll see how he does in Washington. Maybe he had learned from his time before. But anyway, you pay Mike Tomlin. You keep Mike Tomlin around.
Yeah. David, consistency. Yeah. Nobody in this, I think, realistically knows consistency at the head coaching position better than you do. How important is it? But especially when you say Mike, like Chapman said, Mike Tomlin's running the show, meaning the direction that franchise is going in is down to Mike Tomlin, and everyone else follows. Having that leadership and having that direction and having someone to clearly kind of go forward with it is something that the Patriots have had for a very long time. How important is that?
Yeah, I think it's key. I think it's like I just touched on before, like having the Browns and the Lions, and that they are now getting to get their coaches in place. So I do think it's key, and there had been rumours at the end of the season where the Steelers fan base actually wanted to change. They didn't want Tomlin anymore. I thought it was just ludicrous. I mean, if that man was to go on the open market, he'll get tapped up by at least 20 teams easy. So yeah, I think like Chapman said, you give this lad another 3 years. If the consistency doesn't, like you say, if he's on an 8-9 winning streak but doesn't seem to get into the playoffs, then you kind of get together and you part ways, like the Patriots have done with Belichick. They got to a stage where it's not working out anymore for both parties, and it's not a bad thing to have a new, fresh start, fresh clean slate after so many years of that consistency. But yeah, I like I say, pay the man and keep him on. Yeah, still young.
Well, this kind of moves us nicely into the next segment, and this is something that I've been wanting to kind of look at for a little while, and it's head coaches who were on the hot seat. Now, I think it's quite clear, if you get a 3-year extension, if you get any sort of extension, let's face it, right now, Kevin Stefanski and Mike Tomlin are not on a hot seat. They've just been given extensions. But what head coaches for you this season are definitely on the hot seat?
I've got one for you, which off the bat, obviously I know he's got a rookie quarterback, but Matt Eberflus with the, with the Bears. If the Bears don't succeed, he kind of got saved by how well the defense played down the stretch last year. But if they're not successful this year, or there's no sort of progression, or they finish, 5-12 or whatever, then I can't see him staying. To be honest with you.
Yeah, but I don't know. I kind of disagree there, because I get where you're coming from, Tom. But I think as well, you've got a rookie quarterback starting from day one. I know he's got a high ceiling for the lad. Like he should like ball it out, but I don't know. I think it's way too much pressure for him to kind of like succeed in the first season. Although that's my view. I might be wrong.
I agree with you, David. I don't think Eberflus is going to get sacked after 1 year unless it's just totally goes sideways on them.
Oh yeah.
But I think they allowed him to make that pick, and I think the GM put his faith in him for another year.
Was it his pick though? Just anyone's making that pick.
Yeah, but I mean, who cares? Let's not talk about Matt. Let's talk about a much more interesting coach. Robert Saleh, on the very other end, has a 40-year-old quarterback, and his entire coaching career comes down to whether Aaron Rodgers can deliver the goods or not. If he doesn't, the Jets are cleaning house. Everybody's out of there. That's a huge hot seat. Saleh's gone. No matter what he's done with the defense, though, I still find him to be quite questionable as a head coach. But
yeah, we spent we spoke about that last week at Labour quite extensively about.
Sorry, guys.
About no.
I only listen to the episodes I'm on.
It is the obvious choice, isn't it? It's the one, like you said. It is when you've got Aaron Rodgers. Obviously last year he has the excuse of the health, but he's not really shown anything that would suggest. Most other head coaches in that situation would have lost their job, in my opinion. In terms of what he's done over the last 3 seasons. So that's the obvious one, I think, is Saleh. If they don't win, if they don't show clear progress towards being a winning team and challenging for a Super Bowl, then, like you said, clear house.
Everything they've done the past 2 years has been for Rodgers. The players they've brought in, the music they've made in coaching, has all been to bring Rodgers into the building and Rodgers to deliver success. Without Rodgers, the whole thing falls apart. And that's just the crux of it. It's unfortunate, and you can't have a head coach who puts all their eggs into one basket, have all their eggs crack, those eggs crack, and then sit there and go, oh well, you tried. Let's keep going and try another thing.
It's like we said. Sorry, I was just going to say, it's like we said with you look at the Browns last season and why Kevin Stefanski just got his extension. They put all of their eggs in the Watson basket. He got injured last season, only played.
They were able to adjust.
And Kevin Stefanski was able to adjust on the fly and lead that team to 11 wins. So yeah, I think we all agree. I think, well, not just us, but I think everyone in the NFL world agrees that if they don't win this year and win considerately, I don't think a 10-7 season and a wild card exit is going to do it. I think they need to show clear progress towards being a Super Bowl contender. Like we said last week, the whole Super Bowl and bust thing. They truly are Super Bowl and bust. But I think one coach that I would say, which I think is quite an obvious one, and again alludes to what you said, Fletch, about obviously coaches that have just received an extension not being on the hot seat. Mike McCarthy's on the last year of his contract. There's been no commitment from the Cowboys or from Jerry that they're going to sign him this off-season. It looks like they're going to basically give. So yeah, it's how much of a hotter seat could you get than being on the last year of your contract, which I think is a silly thing to do, because you're basically leaving your coach. You're hanging him out to dry essentially. I don't think it's a good situation. Whether it's the quarterback like they're doing with Dak as well, letting him go into the last year of his deal, and then what the best case scenario is they win the Super Bowl and then they've got to pay Dak $100 million a year and like McCarthy $100 million a year, because they didn't sign them previously. So he for me is probably the, other than Salah, is probably the second biggest on the hot seat.
I've got one for you as well. Just with how bad their season ended last year, going from 10-1 to just squeaking out in in the wild card rounds. The Eagles, like Nick Sirianni, obviously, I know he brought them to a Super Bowl, but at the same time, if they're having the same issues they're having last year, like where they have with their defense, obviously I know they've addressed that in the draft, and we can see how well their players. They've obviously got a lot of good potential in terms of players with Quinion Mitchell and Cooper DeJean and stuff. But if they're not actually successful after signing these extensions for Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, yada yada. Like he could be quickly on the hot seat.
What?
I got a less
major-
sexy
I've got-
one.
I'm going to say, so really quick, what major defensive change did the Eagles make before going on that god-awful run?
Oh,
They had your ex-coach.
defensive coordinators, didn't they?
No,
Yeah.
they traded for the
That's
Titans.
It's called
Matt
the
Patricia.
Matt Patricia
Matt
effect.
Patricia.
Oh yeah, and they
It's called the
traded for
Matt
Kenyon
Patricia
Barnes as well.
effect. That
Yeah.
man ruins
Rubbish.
everything he touches.
Thing is, I think that's more of a he lost the locker room, and I think that's if that happens again, like you said. I mean, if the team turns against him, if the players are against him, you can't have a head coach that the team doesn't
Matt
doesn't
Patricia's
support
fault.
and aren't behind.
Exactly.
So I agree with
exactly it.
that one.
No, that doesn't support the Matt Patricia hate. It's Matt Patricia's fault. Anyway, Chapman.
I believe David had one.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly just touch on my one. So I've got Sean McDermott to be on a hot seat this
Yeah,
year.
I agree. I agree.
Depending on how Miami, and we don't know what the Patriots are going to do this year, given with all the changes and etc. They're ones to be. If they don't do anything this year, I reckon there's going to be a massive rebuild in that personnel stuff. So that would be probably my top one that I've got.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you with Sean McDermott. Obviously seeing it firsthand with the Chiefs and the Bills in the playoffs. They've won most regular season games that we play, but in those big moments,
Just can't get over the
he
line.
hasn't been able to step up and overcome. And with a quarterback of Josh Allen's talents, like they should have been able to do that at some point. Obviously, it's difficult when you got Patrick Mahomes on the other side, but at the same time, have they hit their peak with Sean McDermott? That is what remains to be seen. And obviously, they're rebuilding
And
their
letting
wide
Diggs
receiver
go, yeah.
core as well. So yeah, I definitely agree with that one, David. That he's on the hot seat as well.
I think if he makes any more 9/11 comparisons for locker room speeches as well, he's probably going to be gone as well.
Yeah. That was a very interesting take. Yeah.
Well, I think the Bills are at where what I was talking about earlier with Mike Tomlin. You've succeeded. He built a culture. I mean, they've succeeded wildly, but they've hit some sort of ceiling there, possibly. We'll see. Maybe they come out and they look a little different with some of the players they've lost, and sort of their identity might change. But like you said, Tom, they still got Josh Allen. Probably the second best quarterback in the league. So they still will be good. I got a less sexy one, which no one's probably going to talk about. But this is what I hope for all the time. But could this be the year that the Saints finally bottom out?
Yeah,
finally, just like it all comes due.
Oh my God!
Like Dennis Allen, I respect Dennis Allen as a defensive coordinator and all that.
not a good
Dude, he has been. Granted, he's still at least split the series with us. I think 3 years in a row now. But man, that guy just I don't understand what's going on in New
The
Orleans.
Saints have been straight ass.
He's 16
Yeah.
and 18 in his 2 seasons, not made the playoffs with a team in a division. So not the easiest division. Well, I think it's the easiest division. I would want to say with Chapman on there, obviously his team being in that division, but
It's okay.
a team that is deemed by a lot of people as the easiest division in the NFL.
The less talent-rich quarterback division in
Let's
the
say
league.
that.
Just say that.
Let's just say. Let's phrase it like that. He's gone 16 and 18 in the last two seasons that he's been there, and he's not made the playoffs with a team that it's not like Peyton left that team. Bone dry. There was still a lot of good players on that team. The defense was still one of the highest paid defenses in the league, one of the best defenses in the league. So I don't think there's an excuse for him to go 16 and 18. And I think it's really uninspiring personally for me. Like he just doesn't allude, like he doesn't show any kind of demeanor. He doesn't seem like I might be wrong.
Even Ollie, even the end of the season, the way it all petered out, and then there was that game where the Falcons they won, didn't they? With and then in the end, he was getting asked about it, and he was like shriveling up, like he wasn't. He didn't take. He was like,
Yeah.
Oh no, that was where the Saints beat the crap out of us in the last game, and Arthur Smith lost his job.
And that's
And
final
formation.
Jameis Winston they lined up for victory formation, and then they let the running back
they ran a play,
which was
hilarious.
ass, just ass.
Yeah,
Jamal Williams.
I mean, it was anyway, but like he didn't have any control of that. It was like the player's decision, and the fact that they took it out of his hands, didn't.
Granted, he was put in a tough situation because, like you said, it was the players that defied him. But that goes to show my point. If your team were going to completely ignore your head coach and go and do that, does that not point towards and show signs that they maybe don't respect him?
But
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
one thing we all know about final games of the season, that even two teams that don't have anything to play for, players still have something to play for. There are
Incentive
bonuses
bonus.
on the line. This is why certain players still play in Week 17 when there's nothing to play for, when you've got playoffs coming up and whatnot, because you've got regular season receiving yard targets to hit. And that's what I'm saying. Jamal Williams, who'd had, what was it? I can't remember how many touchdowns he had with us the year before, but he had
18.
17 touchdowns with us the year before. He'd
17
broken our
touchdowns.
record. Went all season without a touchdown. I think the idea wasn't it, that like Jamal Williams was such a guy around the locker room, so great to have in the room, that they wanted to give him one touchdown before the season ended, and he'd get a bonus or he'd get
Only
something
Jameis Winston
within his
would have
contract.
done that as well.
But
And I'm
I don't want to, but hold on. Before I don't even know where you're going with this, Fletch. But before you legitimize this, they were beating our ass, and they had
No, I know.
no problem. They had no problem running the ball and winning the game. They were up by 20-something points. You don't get it. You just run the ball over. The Falcons they had given up at that point. The season was over.
I'm just saying
I had
that
no problem Murray getting his ball, whatever. I mean, like, but it was just it was quite classless, man. It just was like
I get it. I'm just saying that the reasoning was that Jameis Winston and everyone gave was giving Jamal Williams
Jameis
a
Winston
touchdown.
is such an idiot that he doesn't even.
Hey.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. He's so oblivious to anything. I mean, he's a good-natured guy, seemingly. And if he was on my team, I'd have a great time with him. But like,
Also-
He's great. He's great.
he's
Also-
so.
He's only been
Happy
here about
wife,
a month.
happy
He's
life.
brilliant.
And I would also say this,
I
Fletch.
agree with what you
The
said.
Falcons and this probably has happened. They could lose every single game the whole season, and if the last game was still it would still be the most entertaining game of that week, no matter what the playoff like, because they hate each other. It is
No, I
like
know.
college rivalry.
And please don't forget that my wife at home is a Saints fan. She listens to the podcast sometimes. If I don't back the Saints up here, it doesn't bode well for me for the rest of the week.
What's her name again, Fletch? Because we need to start calling Superfan out. What's Mrs. Fletch? I'm just gonna say Mrs. Fletch.
Mrs. Fletch.
Mrs. Fletch. I'll do props to Mrs. Fletch. I can't wait till she comes onto the pod. I can do a Chapman and Call like situation again, and we can yell at each other.
Okay.
I'll be respectful though, Fletch.
Okay, yeah, you better, I'd be. So before we wrap up, I've got one last quick question that I want to throw at you all. So we're talking about head coaches on the hot seat. Now, every situation is different around the NFL. Every coach goes into a different scenario, and what was deemed to be a success and not a success is going to be different. Which of the new head coaches is on the shortest leash, as in like who could be the first to be fired, who's got the highest floor to hit? So just as a reminder, the new head coaches this year, the Atlanta Falcons have hired Raheem Morris. The Carolina Panthers have hired Dave Canales. The Raiders kept Antonio Pierce on. Oh, where's it gone there? The Raiders kept on Antonio Pierce. The Chargers have Jim Harbaugh. The New England Patriots have Jared Mayo. The Seattle Seahawks have brought in Mike McDonald. The Tennessee Titans with Brian Callahan. And the Commanders with Dan Quinn. Who out of those has the shortest leash?
I think the obvious is obviously Dave Canales, being that he's gone to the Panthers, and we all know what Tepper's like over there. I mean, how many coaches in the last 4 years they've had over there. But I don't want to talk about that one because that's just an obvious one that I think people are going to say, and I hope it doesn't. I hope he does get the chance that he deserves, seemingly. So I'll probably say Pierce, just because as an interim head coach, he doesn't get that leeway, because obviously they saw what he could do as an interim head coach last season, at the second half of last season, he doesn't kind of get that honeymoon period of being a brand new head coach. So if he's terrible from the start and they start 0-6, I wouldn't be that surprised if he was let go. And I hope he's not. I hope it does go well for him. But it's kind of like, a lot of people say in the NFL, never hire the interim head coach. A lot of people were saying that when it was going into the off season with the Raiders. I think we all agreed they had to do it. I think the Raiders fans would have stormed Allegiant Stadium if they didn't hire him in the end. But I think, just because him being an interim head coach from last season, being hired as an interim, he's probably on the shortest leash, just because, like I said, he doesn't have that kind of that leeway of that honeymoon period of being a brand new head coach.
Ollie, do you mean Arrowhead West?
I'm going to jump in. I'm going to say I think there's probably going to be a lot of pressure on Dan Quinn to turn the Commanders around quickly, only because obviously new ownership group. They've been so dysfunctional under Dan Snyder for 20-some years. There's just so much bad there. You have a fan base who's, one of the, old school fan base in the NFL that hasn't had anything to cheer for. You drafted a quarterback number 2 all around. You brought in, what's his name, who was the Cardinals coach, who got fired last year.
Kingsbury.
Yeah, Kingsbury.
Kingsbury.
Yeah, as your offensive coordinator. Yeah, and which is weird. And with all the other offensive minds and younger offensive coordinating talent out there, but I think he'll be under a lot of pressure. Rich people, as we've seen with Tepper. I mean, it may not be, 1 and done or 2 and done, but I think Dan Quinn's going to have to show success pretty quickly there, in my opinion. David, what do you think about Gerard Mayo? I know he was handpicked by the Crafts, but and he's obviously a longtime Patriot in multiple ways. Do you think they're going to be patient with him because it feels like you guys are in for a slightly, it can happen quickly, but it's gonna take some time there, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of perspective we're getting from our fan base, that we need to give this lad time. You cannot expect the next Belichick. It's the same with May as well. You cannot expect the next Tom Brady. It's going to take the 3 to 4 years to have this fully, even more maybe, we don't know, but I'm hoping around 3 years. It's the worrying thing about Boston is it's not so much their fan base. I think it's more the media side of things, where if they're not happy with something, they will crush it and they will make you.
It's the fan
literally,
base. It's the fan base.
Yeah. That's not the fan base.
As well.
It's the
It's
media.
the fan base as well.
So yeah,
we
I'm
all
just
know
hoping
Cal.
that we do.
We all know Cal.
Oh, I did. Yeah. So yeah, I am hoping that we do give Mayo the time that he needs to make his team. The Belichick era's gone now. It's Mayo's time, and like I say, I just hope that they give him that time. I would have gone for, if short leash head coaches, I would have gone for Raiders. I think Ollie was spot on with what he said there. He didn't have enough time to kind of sink it in and stuff like that. But their owners, he's quite, what's his name, Davis, is it?
Mark Davis.
Mark Davis, yeah. He can be a bit demanding if he's not winning certain games and stuff like that. So I think he's going to be Antonio Pierce for me to want to look out for.
What do you guys think of the Titans?
Callahan.
Brian Callahan.
I'm just annoyed that obviously he took Bill Callahan away from us, the greatest offensive line coach in the history of the NFL. But other than that, he's an odd one though, because he didn't call plays.
Did you just accidentally mispronounce?
He's a legacy. I mean, his dad is a legendary coach.
I know he stolen from the Browns.
Yeah, so. And I think he was handpicked by the GM that pushed Vrabel out. I could see the guy's face. I forgot his name, but anyway, who has the owner. So I think he'll be okay.
You think he'll get time, but obviously the way that they've gone all in this year, it's not like I mean, you'd think they're rebuilding, but the way they've spent money and the players they've brought in, they clearly think they can do something.
Oh yeah, especially defensively.
So I can see your point in terms of like, well, they've gone all in on him. You know, you want to expect results straight away, but I think, like Chapman said, they clearly handpicked him. They clearly have had their eyes on him, because I think it was quite a surprising hire to a lot of people anyway. So I think, you know, alluding to like Chapman said, I think they clearly picked him out of the bunch and they had their eye on him for a while. So I think he will probably get more time. But I think that just alludes to, I just think that the coaches that have been head coaches, like Chapman said, Dan Quinn, people like this, they're always going to get a shorter leash, I think, than brand new, you know, someone like a Mike McDonald in Seahawks, 36 years old, up and coming defensive coordinator. He's never been a head coach before. You're going to give someone like that more time, I think, than you would a Dan Quinn, who's obviously in his 50s, has been a defensive coordinator, has been a head coach before. I'm pretty sure has been in the league for a long time. So I think newer, younger, kind of first-time head coaches are probably going to get more time than the older kind of previous head coaches, like a Dan Quinn.
What about you, Chapman? Chapman, what about you with Raheem Morris as well? Do you know, he's obviously, it was a while ago, but you know, he was a head coach in this league before, like as a hire for the Falcons. Do you think if, like, you know, if Kirk Cousins doesn't start well for you guys, because obviously you guys have a player for caliber team, like if he isn't performing, like do you think there will be pressure on him? Or
I think the pressure is on the team as a whole. I mean, if Kirk Cousins doesn't play well, that's on. I feel like that's on Kirk Cousins. I mean, you know, it's like that's why we also drafted Michael Penix. I mean, I think there's multiple bets there for whatever you think about that team building strategy. That's why that's there. I do think Raheem has a lot of pressure on him, but I think they have a lot of faith in him, and they picked him for a reason. You know, if you listen to people like McVay, you listen to people like Kyle Shanahan, listen to people even like Mike Tomlin, they all have like great things to say. I just hope Raheem gets to live up to his potential. And I know this is not the GM podcast. I think there's actually more pressure on Fontenot as a GM right now than there is, because he's made some really good picks, and he's been able to find a lot of talent on the street, which is great. And he did build the team up decently in the last 3 years. I just always keep comparing ourselves to the Lions because we did this exact same thing. And, you know, they punted on the quarterback for 3 years, unlike the Lions. We definitely are not as good defensively as the Lions because we haven't taken, you know, so anyway, I'm off on a schedule. Anyway, Raheem's gotten pressure, but I think the Falcons have to win this year as a team because I think that's more where the pressure is. Sorry.
Yeah.
This isn't the Falcons podcast.
I agree. I just played devil's advocate just in terms of because he has previously been a head coach before. That was the only thing.
I agree with you, Chapman, as well, though. I think if anyone was going to be on the hot seat there, it would be Terry Fontenot, the GM. And I know you said the blame will be on Kirk if he doesn't play well, but you know it should be. But you know that's not what people are going to do. They're going to look at the people at the top and they're going to say, well, why bring in Kirk? And that's. But like you said, I think that's more going to go towards the GM than it would the head coach.
Maybe. I think our fan base has no attachment to Kurt, to be honest with you. I think he's done everything right.
I don't mean the fan base. I mean like the media. Right. The media they'll spin it as, oh, well, he made a stupid decision bringing Kirk in if Kirk doesn't play well and giving him all this money, and that's how they'll twist it. But again, it just proves my point. Like I was saying, I think it'll be the GM that will get the brunt of that more than it will be Raheem Morris.
Raheem Morris,
I think he'll be all right.
I think we should go back to Canales really quick. I think one of the things, and I could be wrong, but I forgot who his agent is, but I think I think Canales got 6 years, which is a lot for a first-time head coach, which that to me means he's at least getting 3 of those years no matter, because like his agent probably went to Temper and said, look, you don't have a long list. Temper's also paying two coaching staffs right now. And so I think, he will be okay for a bit. And again, unless Temper just is really off the rails. But
I think you've also got to take into account walking into Dave Canales and saying, listen, this team is a mess right now. the whole franchise is a mess. If you want me to do this, you've got to give me the time to do this properly, because it won't happen overnight. And I think that's something similar to, again, mentioning when Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes walk into the Lions. The mess that franchise was in was like, if you want this, if you can't give me the guarantee that you are going to give me the appropriate amount of time, unless something major happens, unless a scandal happens, you've got to give me that time to do this properly.
Yeah, that just alludes to what we were saying earlier.
Guys, every coach that gets hired does that with the owner, and it's the owner. I mean, what world do you think you're not going in as a head coach and saying, look, this is the plan, here it is for 3 years, here's 5 years, blah, blah, blah. That's what they do. And they still get fired because, look, Arthur Smith was on the right direction, and, he just lost the faith that last year because he coached really poorly and he pinned everything on Ritter, and, and he ultimately got to blame. But, every coach goes in and says, I need, look, this is the state of your team. This is what I think. Now, some lie. Some absolutely lie to their owners and say they're better than they are, and then they're out in 3. I mean, that also happens. But,
and some coaches are able to build that foundation, like Brad Holmes, like Dan Campbell did. Like you could see from day one that even when you weren't winning a lot of games, that he built that toughness, that culture.
I'm going to say that what Matt Patricia took over with us was a playoff, like a you should be just about making the playoffs here team with what's his name now? Jim Caldwell.
Coach before Matt, Jim Caldwell?
Yeah, Jim Caldwell. Yeah. It was you should be in the playoffs here. You've got the pieces. Get into the come on, man. You should be in the playoffs. And Matt Patricia walks in from the Patriots when you've got Bob Quinn as your GM and says, "I'm the man to take this good roster and make it great."
Yeah.
Then walked in first day of training camp and went, "You guys all know nothing about football, and I have to teach you all again from the beginning." And one coach I'm looking at right now, and I think looking at some of these situations is saying, I'm looking at Jim Harbaugh. I'm saying Jim Harbaugh has just won the national championship with Michigan. He has arguably the best situation out of any of the coaches going into it. He's got Justin Herbert, for crying out loud. He's got a very good roster. And similar to Raheem Morris, although I think the situation is different, Raheem Morris walks into a lot of talent in that team. But I think Jim Harbaugh walks in and says, I'm the man you've underperformed with the previous coach. You've got the roster to compete. I'm the man to take you to the next level, and I can do that for you with the roster that you've got. You don't need a rebuilding, maybe a couple of pieces to make it my offense and my defense, but this is how we're going to do it, and I can take it, which is why I think Jim Harbaugh might have one of the shortest leashes out of any of the coaches. He's got a decent roster. He's got the pedigree as a coach and just come off a national championship, and he's teased the NFL for a long time and teased Michigan for a long time with the NFL. The eyes are on him to succeed, and if he doesn't succeed quite quickly,
cheap ownership, he's not getting fired for 5 years, no matter what he does. You're so wrong, Fletch. I could not disagree with you more.
The name alone will give him 2 years.
He will get 5 years easy.
Yeah, the name alone will give him 2 years. I think the fact that they have lost quite a lot, I mean, you say that the rosters, but I would probably contend with that with the pieces that they've lost. The wide receiver core being, Lad McConkey,
Keenan Allen, Mike Williams.
Yeah, and all the players they've lost and stuff. So I would have to disagree with that one. I think his name alone will give him 2 years.
And Spanos is the cheapest daggum owner in the NFL. He is not paying coaches that he does,
Because he must have dropped a big deal to go there, I'm guessing. So
yes, he did. I think he got 5. Yeah,
he ain't going to be paying that if he doesn't have to.
I would say if it went sideways, maybe he's out in 4. But that's like if it goes sideways again.
So, right, I'm going to put it down as this is my hot take. Bookmark it, clip it, come back to me in 2 years.
You just want him back at Michigan, don't you? Come on. Admit it.
Sharon Moore Sharon Moore's gonna run the country.
You want him
It's
to
fine.
be fired, and he can come back to Michigan, and maybe you can beat Ohio State 3 out of the 8 times that you play them again under his tutelage.
Sharon Moore's gonna keep
All you want is
walking.
more, Fletch. All you want is more.
They'll probably end up
What
getting rid
market?
of Herbert before.
Yeah.
Come back to in 2 years.
He'll somehow trade for JJ McCarthy, and
Or something.
Blake
You
Coleman.
won't want to pay for Herbert.
they already are. Too late.
They already paid him.
Yeah, they already paid him.
Too
Or
late.
did they?
They had to name. They had to sell the naming
yeah.
rights to the stadium,
that was the Bengals.
That's the fact.
That was
Yes,
the
what was I
Bengals.
thinking? The Bengals, right? Yeah, sorry.
That's actually true. People think I'm trolling when I say that. That's actually true.
No, they did.
Because
Yeah, that's right.
a lot of people. So with the guarantees in NFL contracts, it has to be paid immediately into escrow. So if you haven't got the cash up front to what was his deal, 215 guaranteed million. If he hasn't got that cash to pay that up front, obviously they can't sign the deal. So he had to take out a little bit of stadium right money just to pay that. Any chance to crap on the Bengals?
And on that note, we will leave it on a crap on the Bengals. So, I want to thank you all for joining me on this Monday evening. And before we go, where did I have that there? Want to make sure you give us a follow on social media at hurdletheline. That'd be on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at hurdletheline. Follow the Asleep at Work Network on social media while you're at it, and in all the descriptions below you can check out all of the wonderful hosts we've had today, including myself, so you know who to avoid on social media. So give us all a follow. And check out some of our sponsors. You can get NFL swag just in time for the season. You can get a VPN so you can, watch some television prior to the season. Legally watch TV. VPN's illegal. It's fine. Let's go double check that. But you can get VPNs too. But mostly NFL swag. We're in it for the NFL swag just before the season. Lads, thank you very much.
Thank you, Fletch.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fletch.
Cheers, mate. All good.
And hurdle that line.
I'll see you next week, you little line hurdlers.